Chapter 1. What if the first philosopher was afraid of the dark? Imagine him not as a statue, weathered and wise, with a marble beard and eyes fixed eternally on some celestial truth. No. Picture him as a man lying awake in the deep Milesian night. The air is still, heavy with the scent of the sea. The only sound is the rhythmic push and pull of the waves against the harbor wall, a sound that is less a noise and more a feeling, the very breath of the world. And in this profound darkness, Thales is afraid, not of bandits or spirits or the whims of a temperamental god. His is a deeper, more unsettling fear, the fear of the unknown, not out there beyond the city walls, but right here in the very nature of things. The fear of a universe without a story, without a reason, without a thread. This is where we must begin, not with his answers, but with his anxiety. Because all true philosophy, all genuine wonder, begins not with certainty, but with a quiet, trembling question mark in the soul. We have sanitized these figures, these so-called fathers of thought, polished them until they gleam with the patina of accomplishment. But before the accomplishment, there was the ache. Before the theorem, there was the terror of the vast, indifferent sky. He was a man of commerce, of politics, a traveler who had seen the grand, archaic knowledge of Egypt and Babylon. He knew the stories, the myths that painted the world with the brush of divine drama. Zeus hurling lightning, Poseidon churning the seas. But perhaps lying there, those stories began to feel thin, like a garment too small for a growing body. What if the lightning was not a weapon, but a phenomenon? What if the sea's tide was not a god's mood, but a force? This thought is not comforting. It is terrifying. To remove the gods is to remove the parents from the house, leaving one alone in the creaking silence. It is to trade a world full of intention for a world that might be mute. And so his search for a fundamental principle, for the arche, the underlying substance of all things, was not merely an intellectual exercise. It was a desperate, beautiful attempt to find a nightlight, to find a single constant thing, water, he proposed, that could tie the chaos of existence together. If everything is water in its essence, then the crashing wave, the hard stone, the flickering flame, and the very breath in your lungs are all relatives. They are family. The universe is no longer a collection of strangers, but a single, interconnected entity. This was his solace, his answer to the darkness. He was building a raft of reason to sail on the black ocean of the unknown. And isn't that what we do in our own way when the lights go out and the day's distractions fall away? We are not contemplating the nature of primordial water, perhaps, but we are grappling with our own fundamentals. What is the substance of my life? Is there a thread that connects the fragments, success, failure, love, loss, or is it all just random noise? Thales's fear is our fear. His quest is our quest. We too lie awake and seek a principle, a single truth to hold on to, that makes sense of the tempest and the calm. We are all trying to name the water that we are made of. And as your eyes grow heavy, consider the comfort he offered not just to himself, but to all of us who would follow. The comfort of a single, simple, unifying idea, that at the heart of everything there is a common source, a shared origin, a kinship of existence. And in that thought, the darkness becomes less frightening. It becomes familiar. There is a peace that comes from finding a single answer to quiet the many questions. But the mind, especially a mind like his, does not rest for long. It takes the answer, turns it over, like a smooth stone in the palm, feeling for the cracks. And sometimes The most profound truth is not in the answer itself, but in the moment it fails you, and you find yourself falling into a deeper understanding. Chapter 2. Is the greatest insight not in looking up, but in stumbling down? There is a story about Thales that has been passed down for millennia, often told with a gentle, condescending chuckle. The great philosopher, so intent on studying the stars, was walking along, his gaze lifted to the heavens, and he fell into a well. A servant girl, the story goes, laughed at him. The wise man, so knowledgeable about the distant cosmos, couldn't see what was right at his feet. We've always been told this tale as a cautionary one, a warning against being so airy-fairy, so abstracted from the real world that you become a fool. But what if we have it backwards? What if the real fool is the one who never looks up from the well? What if the fall was not the failure of his philosophy, but its most vital, most human confirmation? Consider the scene not from the perspective of the laughing girl, but from Thales's, in that moment of shocking, cold immersion. The sky is suddenly gone, replaced by the dark, close walls of the well. The abstract calculations of celestial motion are replaced by the immediate, urgent need to climb out. It is a moment of pure humility, of being reacquainted with the earth. And for a man who believed the fundamental substance of all things was water, what a profound and ironic baptism. He didn't just think about water, he was plunged into it. His theory became his reality in the most visceral way possible. This stumble, this fall, is the essential counterweight to the grand gaze. It is the grounding wire. True wisdom is not just about contemplating the infinite. It is about integrating that infinite perspective with the finite, muddy, and often embarrassing reality of being a body, a creature, a man who can trip. The story isn't about the failure of astronomy. It's about the necessity of both the stars and the well. One gives you context, the other gives you traction. One offers the dream, the other demands the response. In our own lives, we are often taught to aspire to the stargazing, to set lofty goals, to keep our eyes on the prize, to aim high. And yes, there is value in that, but we are never taught the value of the fall. We see our missteps, our embarrassments, our sudden plunges into cold reality as marks of failure. But what if they are the very things that make our philosophy real? What if losing the job, the heartache, the public humiliation, the quiet private disappointment, what if these are our wells? They are the moments that force us to test our grand theories against the cold water of truth. They are what make our wisdom compassionate, relatable, and ultimately usable. Thales, after he climbed out, dripping and chastened, did not abandon his study of the stars. He likely continued it with a new kind of knowledge, a knowledge that had passed through the body. His philosophy was no longer just a thing of the mind. It was a thing of the damp tunic and the shivering skin. And perhaps that is the insight we can carry into the vulnerability of sleep, that we do not have to choose between the grand vision and the humble reality. The goal is not to avoid the well. The goal is to gaze at the stars with such intensity that you are willing to risk the fall, knowing that the climb back out will teach you something that pure observation never could. So as you drift, release the need to be the perfect stargazer. Embrace the stumbles. They are not interruptions to your journey. They are the very ground of it. And from that grounded place, from the integration of the lofty dream and the humble reality, a final, more subtle question begins to form. It's a question about legacy, about what truly remains of a life spent in thought, It's about the silent, patient work that happens not in the public square, but in the private mind, work that only reveals its value long after the thinker is gone. Chapter 3. What debt does the waking world owe to a dream? Thales left no writings, or if he did, they vanished into the same historical mist from which he emerged. We know him only through the reports of others, mainly Aristotle writing centuries later. His legacy is not a book we can hold, not a manuscript filled with his own words. It is an echo, a rumor of a thought, a single stubborn idea that took root in the mind of another, and then another, until it grew into the great, sprawling tree of Western philosophy. So what did he truly bequeath to us? It is something more fragile and more powerful than a doctrine. He gave us a posture, a tilt of the head. Before Thales, the questions were answered by stories. After Thales, the questions were answered by questions. He initiated the great, audacious shift from mythos to logos, from story to reason. He looked at a world explained by the conflicts of gods and said, yes, but what is it made of? What is its nature? He planted the seed of a thought that would grow for centuries, that the universe is not a capricious narrative, but a coherent system that can be understood by the human mind. But here is the part we often forget. This great awakening, this dawn of rational thought, was born in the dream space of a single man. It was a private intuition, a quiet hunch, that the world had a consistent, underlying nature. He dreamed the dream of a rational cosmos. And we, today, 2,500 years later, are living in the world that woke up from that dream. Every scientific experiment, every logical argument, every time we seek a natural cause for an event, we are walking a path he first sketched in the sand of his own imagination. The debt we owe is not to his specific answer, water, but to the courage of his question. He gave us permission to ask why and how in a way that sought evidence, not just solace. He gave us the intellectual tools to build a world of technology, medicine, law. But this debt comes with a quiet cost. In embracing the rational dream, we sometimes risk losing the enchantment of the myth. We gain predictability, but we can lose the poetry. The stars become burning balls of gas, their stories written in physics, not in the constellations of heroes. The sea becomes H2O, its moods explained by lunar gravity, not by a trident-wielding god. And so, as you lie here, in the liminal space between waking and dreaming, you exist at the crossroads of Thales's legacy. You have the rational mind he helped to invent, capable of following this very narrative. And you have the dreaming mind, the myth-making mind, that thrived long before him and still whispers to you as sleep approaches. The debt we owe is not a demand to choose one over the other. It is an invitation to honor both, to appreciate the staggering gift of a knowable world while still leaving room for the mystery, for the poetry that reason can never quite capture. Thales's true gift was the dream of order, and as you surrender to your own dreams tonight, you participate in that same mysterious process. Your mind will weave its own patterns, seek its own underlying principles for the chaos of the day. You are, in a small, quiet way, continuing his work. The waking world owes a debt to the dream, because the dream is where new worlds are born. So close your eyes without fear. Let the rational mind rest its vigilant watch, and allow the older, more poetic mind to speak. It was there long before philosophy, and it will be there long after. A deep, dark, creative water from which all things, even the most brilliant thoughts, eventually arise. Rest now. The first philosopher can wait. Your own philosophy is just beginning. Chapter 4. What if your certainty is the very thing that keeps you adrift? There's a particular kind of silence that settles in after you've finally made up your mind. A silence that feels like victory, doesn't it? The debate is over. The case is closed. The world for a moment snaps into sharp, manageable focus. It's a relief. We cling to these certainties like a sailor in a storm clings to a single piece of driftwood. They feel like solid ground in a sea of chaos. But what if that piece of driftwood is the very thing keeping you from the shore? What if the certainty you grip so tightly is the anchor that holds you in the deep, forever circling the same dark waters, while the true coastline remains a distant, unseen myth? I want you to picture him not as a statue, but as a man, Thales of Miletus, a man walking the shorelines of Ionia, the Aegean Sea breathing its salt-heavy breath onto the land. The world he was born into was a world explained by gods. A lightning bolt was the fury of Zeus, a good harvest, the generosity of Demeter, the sea's tempest, the mood of Poseidon. It was a certain world in its own way, a dramatic, unpredictable certainty, but a certainty nonetheless. There was an answer for everything, even if that answer was a capricious, divine whim. To question it was not just intellectual rebellion, it was sacrilege, a trembling of the very foundations of reality. But Thales, he looked at the water not as the domain of a god, but as water. He looked at the world and dared to ask a question that must have felt, at the time, like madness. What if it all works according to a rule, not a mood, not a whim, but a principle, a logos? This was the original, and perhaps the greatest, act of intellectual courage. It wasn't just about proposing water as the fundamental substance. It was about the proposal itself. It was about letting go of the driftwood of divine certainty and choosing to swim in the vast, unknown ocean of a question. Imagine the vertigo, the sheer terrifying loneliness of that thought, to stand beneath a star-filled sky and no longer see the glittering chariots of the gods, but to see patterns, mathematics, a clockwork of unimaginable scale. He traded the comfort of a story he knew for the terrifying grandeur of a truth he could only guess at. And this is where the story becomes a mirror, because we all have our certainties, don't we? Not about the gods of Olympus, perhaps, but about ourselves, our capabilities, our limitations, the stories we tell ourselves about why we are the way we are. I'm just not a creative person. I've never been good with numbers. That's just the way I am. These are our personal myths, our sacred stories. They give a name to the chaos of our own potential. They are the Poseidon and Zeus of our inner world, and they feel so solid, so real. We build our lives around them. But what if they are just that? Stories. What if the thing you are most certain about, that core, foundational belief about your own nature, is the very thing holding you back from a shore you cannot even imagine? Thales' great insight was not that everything was water. It was that everything could be inquired about. The universe was not a secret to be kept by the gods, but a puzzle to be slowly, patiently understood by the human mind. He exchanged the certainty of an answer for the vitality of a question, and in doing so, he gifted us the most precious and fragile of all human tools: doubt. Not the cynical doubt that erodes, but the hopeful doubt that builds, the doubt that whispers, "The map you have is not the territory. There is more to see." So tonight, As you lie here in the quiet, I invite you to consider the driftwood you're clinging to. What is the one certainty about your own life that you have never truly questioned? Not with anger, not with frustration, but with a gentle, Thales-like curiosity. What if it weren't true? Just for a moment. Don't try to solve it. Don't try to replace it. Just feel the space that opens when that certainty is gently set adrift. It's a frightening space, yes. It's the open ocean. But it is also the only place from which a new shoreline can ever be sighted. The peace we often seek is not found in tighter grips, but in quieter releases. It is the peace of the question, not the tyranny of the answer. And in that release, you might just find yourself beginning to float rather than fight, carried by a current wiser than any destination you could have forced yourself toward. And as that thought settles, like a stone finding its rest at the bottom of a deep pool, another image surfaces, not of water, but of earth, a hole, a misstep, a moment of public humiliation that has echoed for millennia. And the question rises, what could such a stumble possibly have to teach us about the heavens? Chapter 5. Can a man who fell into a well truly hear the music of the spheres? The story is almost too perfect, a parable crafted by time itself. Thales, the wise man, the philosopher, so intent on studying the stars that he fails to see the well at his feet. He tumbles in, and from the shadows, a young Thracian servant girl laughs. Her laughter rings out, clear and sharp, a sound that has traveled down the centuries to mock the ivory tower, to remind the dreamer of the earth beneath him. We hear this story, and we smile. We see the punchline, the absent-minded professor, the brain so lost in the clouds that it becomes useless on the ground. But what if we've been hearing it wrong all this time? What if the joke isn't on Thales? What if the joke is on us? Consider the well. What is it? A man-made thing, a practical invention. Its purpose is singular, to draw water from the deep earth, to sustain the body. It is the symbol of the immediate, the necessary, the grounded. The world of the servant girl is the world of the well. It is real, urgent, true in its own way. Now consider the stars. What are they? To the world of the well, they are useless. They give no light you can read by, they grow no crops, they quench no thirst. They are, for all practical purposes, decorations, a distraction. But Thales saw something else. He saw in the stars a different kind of utility. Not for the body, but for the mind. Not a way to navigate the field, but a way to navigate existence itself. His fall into the well was not a failure of perception. It was the byproduct of a different kind of focus. He was listening to a music so faint, so vast, that the clamor of the immediate world had faded into a background hum. The laughter of the servant girl was the sound of that immediate world reasserting itself. It was the sound of one kind of truth crashing into another. And this, perhaps, is the central tension of a life examined. The tug of war between the well and the stars, between the urgent and the important, between the life that is demanded of us and the life that calls to us in whispers. We are all, in some way, that Thracian girl. We have responsibilities, jobs to do, wells that need tending. And these things are not trivial. They are the stuff of life. But we are also, if we dare to be, Thales. We have within us a capacity to look up, to ask questions that have no practical answer, to listen for a music that has no tangible reward. The tragedy is not that Thales fell. The tragedy would be if he, after the laughter subsided, chose never to look up again. if he spent the rest of his days staring into the well, ensuring he never stumbled, becoming a master of the immediate, but a stranger to the infinite. The magic, the quiet rebellion, is that he presumably climbed out, dried off, and went right back to staring at the stars. He understood both worlds are real. The well keeps you alive, but the stars tell you why. So I ask you, in the quiet of this night, where have you chosen the well over the stars? When has the laughter of 1,000 imagined servant girls, the voices of practicality, of conformity, of should and must, kept you from gazing at your own heavens? It doesn't have to be astronomy. It can be the book you never write, the instrument you never learn, the quiet reflection you never take, because there is always another well to tend to. We are afraid of falling, afraid of the laughter, so we keep our eyes on the ground, and we call this being responsible. But what if true responsibility includes tending to the soul? What if a life lived only with eyes to the ground is a life half-lived? The man who fell into the well may have been a fool in the eyes of the world, but he was also the man who predicted a solar eclipse, who measured the pyramids by their shadow, who laid the groundwork for geometry. He heard the music of the spheres precisely because he was willing to risk the occasional fall. His stumble was not the proof of his irrelevance, it was the proof of his reach. Tonight, give yourself permission to stumble, to look up, to listen for the music that has no practical use other than to remind you that you are part of something breathtakingly vast. The well will still be there in the morning, but the stars are clearest in the dark. And from that tension, between the earthly stumble and the celestial gaze, a final, more profound question emerges, one that lies at the heart of all things, quiet as a secret, a question about the source and the end and the gentle paradox that connects them. Chapter 6. Is the source of everything also its final, silent apology? Thales looked at the world and saw water, not just as a substance, but as the arche, the first principle, the fundamental nature of reality. Everything comes from water, he proposed. The earth floats on it like a log. Life is nourished by it. It can be solid, liquid, vapor. It is the ultimate shapeshifter, the progenitor of all forms. It is the source. But let's sit with that idea for a moment, not as a scientific hypothesis, but as a poetic, emotional truth. What does it mean for the essence of everything to be fluid, to be tender, to be in its own way yielding? We often imagine the foundation of the universe as something hard, unchanging, the atom, the law of physics, the unmoved mover, a bedrock of absolute impersonal rigor. But Thales imagined something soft, something that gives way to the touch, something that reflects the sky but also cradles the stone. Water is not a dictator, it is a facilitator. It takes the shape of its container. It carves canyons not through force, but through persistent, gentle presence. It is the element of connection, of flow, of life itself. If this is the source of all things, then the universe begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, not with a command, but with an embrace. Now, follow this thought to its quiet, inevitable conclusion. If everything comes from this soft, yielding, fluid source, then everything, in its deepest essence, is also soft, yielding, and fluid. The rock, the mountain, the hardened heart, the rigid belief. These are all temporary forms, illusions of solidity. In the end, they all return to the source, They dissolve back into the fluid from which they came. The mountain erodes into sand and is carried to the sea. The hardened heart, given enough time and the right conditions, can be softened by a tear, by a memory, by love. The rigid belief, when faced with the relentless flow of new experience, eventually cracks and washes away. And this return, this dissolution, is it a tragedy? Or is it a release? Is it an apology? Think of the struggles of a lifetime, the pain of resistance, the ache of trying to hold a shape, to maintain a form, to be solid and permanent in a universe that is, at its heart, fluid and transient. We exhaust ourselves building dams against the current. We fight the flow. We see the softening of age, the erosion of our certainties, the letting go that death requires, as a failure, as a defeat. But what if it's a homecoming? What if the universe, in its infinite wisdom, began as water precisely so that everything could eventually return to a state of grace? What if the fundamental nature of reality is not a harsh, unyielding law, but a gentle, forgiving medium? The source, then, is also the destination. And the destination is a silent apology for all the hardship endured by the forms it temporarily took. It is as if the universe is whispering, "I am sorry for the solidity. I am sorry for the friction, the pain, the sharp edges of a separate existence. It was necessary for the dance of form, for the story to be told. But now you can come home. Now you can stop fighting. Now you can just flow." This is the deep, sleeping truth that Thales' philosophy offers us. A philosophy not of harsh truths, but of tender reconciliations. Your worries, your anxieties, the solid, heavy weight you carry on your shoulders. Feel it now, in the dark, and then imagine it, just for a moment, as ice. Imagine the gentle, inexorable warmth of the source itself, the fundamental warmth of being, beginning to thaw it, not attacking it, not judging it, just warming it, until it begins to soften, to lose its hard edges, to become once again water, to join the flow from which it never was truly separate. The great journey, then, is not toward greater solidity, but toward a more graceful fluidity. It is the journey from the ice chip to the ocean, and every release, every letting go, every quiet surrender to the night is not a failure, but a practice of this homecoming. The source of everything is not a distant, cold point of origin. It is the ocean that has been calling to the drop of water that you are all along. And its message is the simplest, most peaceful truth of all. You do not have to try so hard. You can let go. You can flow. The universe itself is designed for it. And in that flow, there is no more conflict. There is only a gentle, endless, and final return. A silent apology, accepted at last. Now, sleep. Chapter 7. What if the first step toward knowing everything was to admit you knew nothing? There is a silence that comes not from emptiness, but from a fullness too great to comprehend. It's the silence of the sea at night, when the black water holds more worlds than the star-strewn sky above it. And it is into that kind of silence that we must now venture. To a man standing on a shore under a canopy of stars, feeling the weight of all he did not know. We are taught to chase certainty, to build our lives upon the bedrock of facts we can recite. But what if the very first and most profound philosophical act was not an answer, but a surrender? What if the gateway to wonder is not a key of iron certainty, but the delicate, terrifying act of letting go? Imagine him, not as a statue in a book, but as a man, Thales of Miletus, a man of commerce and politics, a man who dealt in olive presses and the hard currencies of life. His feet were planted in the mud and the markets of the waking world. He knew the price of things, and yet, when the business of the day was done, he would walk away from the noise of the city, down to where the land gave way to the endless whisper of the Aegean. He would stand there, not as a master, but as a student, and he would perform the most radical act a thinking mind can undertake. He would empty his own cup. Before he could ask, "What is everything made of?" he had to first confess, "I do not know what anything is made of." This is not a statement of ignorance, but one of profound courage, the courage to strip away the stories we are told, the assumptions we inherit, the comfortable illusions that make the world feel small and manageable. To stand before the immense, breathing mystery of existence and to say, "I am ready to be taught." This is the first and most difficult step. It is a step that requires a peculiar kind of strength, the strength to be vulnerable before the universe. We spend our lives building fortresses of certainty around our fragile selves. We define ourselves by our jobs, our beliefs, our possessions. These are the answers we cling to. But Thales, in that moment on the shore, was dismantling his own fortress, brick by brick. He was making himself small so that the world could become large. Think of your own life. The moments of deepest learning, of most genuine connection, have likely not come when you were proclaiming what you knew, but when you were quiet enough to admit what you didn't. The conversation that changed you happened when you stopped preparing your next point and truly listened. The skill you finally mastered began with the humbling admission, "I have no idea how to do this." We fear this emptiness. We confuse it with incompetence, with failure. We fill our days with noise, with podcasts and screens and endless to-do lists, because the silence of not knowing feels like a void. But what if it is not a void? What if it is a fertile ground? Thales, by choosing to not know, was tilling the soil of his own mind. He was creating a space where a new kind of thought could grow, a thought not bound by tradition or superstition, but rooted in observation, in reason, in a patient, humble dialogue with the world itself. And from that fertile emptiness, a question bloomed, a question so simple a child might ask it, yet so profound it would echo for millennia. What is the fundamental substance of the cosmos? What is the single, underlying principle from which all this magnificent diversity springs? While others look to the gods on Mount Olympus, to the capricious wills of Zeus and Hera, Thales looked to the water at his feet. He felt its coolness, watched its reflections of the stars, saw its power to give life and to take it away. He saw it exist as a solid, a liquid, a vapor, transforming itself yet remaining in essence water. And he wondered, could the entire cosmos be a manifestation of this one transformative substance? It was a guess, of course, an elegant, beautiful guess. But the genius was not in the answer. The genius was in the method. The genius was in the quiet, receptive state that made the question possible. He was not imposing his will upon the world. He was listening to it. And in doing so, he heard the first faint whisper of a truth that had been waiting since the beginning of time. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, consider the fortresses you have built. What might you see? What might you hear? What new shore might you find if you had the courage to lay down your tools and simply admit for a moment that you do not know? The universe is not intimidated by our certainty, but it speaks, in a voice softer than a whisper, to our humility. Chapter 8. Can a life of the mind leave its fingerprint on the turning world? We often picture the thinker as a figure apart, a man in a study surrounded by books, his gaze turned inward, disconnected from the grubby, practical concerns of daily life. There is a famous story about Thales, told to mock the philosopher. While gazing at the stars, he was so absorbed in the heavens that he failed to see the well at his feet, and so he tumbled in. The moral, we are told, is that philosophers are useless. But what if we have been reading that story backwards all this time? What if the fall is not the point? What if the true subversive message is that the man who looks at the stars is the same man who can, with startling clarity, change the world he walks upon? Can a thought, born in the silent chambers of the mind, truly leave a fingerprint on the turning earth? Thales was not just a stargazer. He was, by the accounts of his time, a man of immense practical skill. And there is one story, less famous than the fall, but far more revealing. It is said that, by his keen observation of the heavens and his understanding of the patterns of weather, he once predicted an exceptionally abundant olive harvest. Seeing what others could not see, not through magic, but through reason, he quietly went and put down deposits on all the olive presses in Miletus and on the island of Chios. He rented them for a low price, because no one else saw the boom coming. When the harvest arrived and the demand for presses skyrocketed, he controlled the supply. He could charge whatever he wished, and he made a fortune. The point of the story is not that the first philosopher was a monopolist. The point is that his philosophy was not an escape from the world. It was a tool for engaging with it more deeply, more clearly, than anyone else. He saw the connection between the stars and the soil, between the patterns in the sky and the fruit on the trees. His mind was a bridge. He demonstrated that the same rationality used to ponder the origin of the cosmos could be used to understand the mechanics of the marketplace. This is a revolutionary idea. It shatters the artificial wall we often build between the theoretical and the practical, between the sacred and the profane. It suggests that the search for truth is not a hobby for the idle rich, but a powerful way of being in the world. Thales was applying a principle, that the universe operates according to consistent, observable laws. If you can understand those laws, you are not just a spectator of reality. You are a participant who can navigate it with intention and grace. His fortune was merely a side effect of his deeper understanding. Now, bring this into the dim light of your own room. How often do we compartmentalize our lives? The work mind, the home mind, the wondering mind. We keep them in separate boxes. We go through our days, reacting to events, putting out fires, feeling like leaves blown by the wind of circumstance. But what if the clarity we seek in our quiet moments, the insights we have about life, about people, about what truly matters, could be applied to the very practical challenges we face? What if the same patience you cultivate while listening to a friend could be applied to a difficult negotiation? What if the pattern you notice in a novel could help you see a pattern in your own habits? Thales invites us to build that bridge. He asks us to stop seeing our inner wisdom as separate from our outer actions. The mind that ponders the stars is not absent from the world. It is the very mind that can walk through it without falling into its wells. The fingerprint of a thoughtful life is not always a grand invention or a vast fortune. Sometimes it is simply a day lived with less friction, a problem solved with a little more elegance, a conversation handled with a little more grace. It is the quiet satisfaction of seeing the connection between the star and the seed and acting accordingly. What is the final apology of a universe that needs no forgiveness? There is a tenderness in the conclusion of a long life of thought. The bold pronouncements, the sharp-edged theories, they all eventually soften like stones worn smooth by the sea. Thales, in his final years, was said to have offered a strange, beautiful summation of his existence. He said, "I am grateful to fortune for three things: that I was born a human and not a beast, a man and not a woman, and a Greek and not a barbarian." To our modern ears, this can sound arrogant, even offensive. But to hear only the arrogance is to miss the whisper beneath the words. It is to miss the final, quiet lesson of the man who looked for the one thing in the many. What if this isn't a statement of pride but a confession of awe? What if it is the grateful acknowledgement of a staggering debt? What is the final apology of a universe that needs no forgiveness? Let us listen more closely. He is not saying, "I am better than a beast, a woman, or a barbarian." He is saying, "I have been given a gift I did not earn." To be born a human was, to him, the gift of a mind capable of reason, of asking the question, why? To be born a man, in that specific time and place, was the gift of the freedom to pursue that question in the public square, a freedom largely denied to women. To be born a Greek was the gift of a language and a culture that valued the life of the mind. He is listing his privileges, not to boast of them, but to express his profound gratitude for the sheer, unmerited luck of his circumstances. He is looking back at the path his life has taken and recognizing that the very tools he used to seek fundamental truths, his reason, his freedom, his culture, were themselves gifts from the universe. They were the starting point, not the finish line. This is the humility of the sage, not the arrogance of the bigot. It is the recognition that the quest for knowledge begins from a specific, fragile place. His famous answer, "All is water," was his attempt to give something back, to offer an explanation, a piece of understanding, as a form of thanks for the capacity to understand. In this light, his entire philosophical project can be seen as an act of gratitude. It was his way of saying, "Thank you," for the mind that could wonder. And this leads us to the edge of the deepest mystery. The universe, in its silent, relentless unfolding, does not need our thanks. It does not require our apologies or our praise. It simply is, and yet here we are, conscious fragments of it, feeling compelled to offer both. We look at the suffering, the chaos, the inexplicable cruelties, and we demand an apology. We look at the beauty, the love, the sheer fact of our own awareness, and we feel a gratitude so deep it has no words. Thales, in his final gratitude, was perhaps touching on this paradox. The universe gives us the capacity to question it, to love it, to rage against it. It gives us the tools to seek a single, unifying principle, and it also gives us the bewildering diversity that makes the search so difficult. It offers no final answer, no ultimate justification for its ways. Its only apology, its only blessing, is the opportunity it gives us to look upon it with wonder. The gift is the search itself. The privilege is the ache of the question. As you drift now between the world of thought and the world of dreams, consider the unearned gifts that have brought you to this quiet moment. The mind that can hear these words, the heart that can feel their resonance, the safety of this room. These are your starting points. They are not your accomplishments, but your fortune. And any truth you find, any moment of peace you cultivate, any insight that helps you navigate the dark, that is your way of saying thank you. It is the fingerprint your soul leaves on the silent, apologetic blessing of being here at all. The universe does not need your gratitude, but it has given you the capacity to feel it. And in the quiet offering of that feeling, in the deep, grateful silence that follows a thought, fully thought, you meet the source of everything, not with a demand, but with a gift of your own, a gift it gave you the means to make. And in that exchange, there is a peace that passes all understanding. Chapter 10. What if the anchor of reality is not stone, but a longing? There is a story we tell ourselves when the lights go out, a story so old we forget it's even there. It's the story of the ground, that it is solid, that it is there, that when you place your foot upon it, it will hold you. This is the first contract of the waking world, the fundamental promise we make with our eyes open. But what if the very first man to truly think? What if he looked down at that ground and felt not assurance, but a profound and unsettling doubt? What if he sensed, deep in his bones, that the world was not anchored by stone, but by a kind of longing, a thirst? And what if that changes everything about the way you lie down tonight, about the trust you place in the pillow beneath your head? Imagine him, not as a venerable sage, but as a man walking the shoreline of Miletus. The Aegean Sea is not a postcard for him. It is the edge of the known world, a breathing, shifting, hungry mystery. He feels the grit of the sand, wet and compact under his sandals. He sees the river, the meander, winding its way to this very spot, surrendering its fresh water to the great salt body. And he sees the ships, the lifeblood of his city, riding on the surface of a substance that has no surface of its own, a substance that gives way, that parts for the hull, that closes again without a scar. He sees the rain fall from the sky and disappear into the earth, and he sees it return, miraculously, in the cool water drawn from a well. Everything changes. The solid becomes liquid, the liquid becomes vapor, the vapor becomes cloud, and the cloud becomes the rain that nourishes the solid earth. Where is the true state of things? Where is the home to which everything returns? We, in our age of atoms and equations, might nod and say he was groping toward a theory of elements. But that is to miss the emotional core of the revelation, the quiet tremor it sent through the human soul. Thales was not merely proposing a scientific principle, he was articulating a feeling. He was giving voice to a homesickness for a fundamental state. He looked at the world and saw not a collection of objects, but a single, restless process of yearning. Water for him was not H2O. It was the principle of fluidity itself, the capacity to take any shape, to flow, to adapt, to hide in the air and swim in the earth. It was the essence of potential. And in declaring that everything is made of water, he was saying something far more beautiful, far more terrifying. Everything is made of a longing to become something else. Think of your own life in the quiet of this moment, the solid things you rely on, the roof, the walls, the bed frame. They feel permanent, but are they? The wood was once a living, breathing tree, drinking water from the soil. The plaster was once powder, mixed with water to become a paste. The very cells of your body are bathed in fluid, dependent on a constant flowing exchange. We are not solid beings temporarily holding some liquid. We are liquid beings who have learned for a little while to hold a shape. Our bodies are a temporary agreement between countless droplets, a brief consensus to be a man, a woman, to be you, before we inevitably return to the flow. Thales saw this. He saw that the anchor of reality is not fixity, but flux. The ground beneath you is not holding still. It is pausing. It is catching its breath. And this changes the nature of sleep, doesn't it? When you lie down at night, you are surrendering your shape, the careful posture of the day, the firm boundaries of your identity, the solidity of your thoughts. They all begin to soften, to melt. You drift. And in that drifting, are you not returning just a little to that fundamental state? Are you not becoming a little more like water? The mind flows into dreams, unbounded by logic. The body relaxes its form. This is not a failure of consciousness. It is a homecoming. The fear of sleep, the resistance we sometimes feel to letting go, is perhaps a fear of this truth. The truth that our deepest nature is not the sturdy ship, but the sea upon which it floats. Thales, in his simple, profound statement, was offering not a threat, but a profound comfort. He was saying, your essence is not the brittle, breakable form you work so hard to maintain all day. Your essence is the endless, adaptable, life-giving flow from which that form emerged. To sleep is not to risk dissolution. It is to remember your source. It is to be for a few precious hours what you have always been. So as you feel the weight of your body on the mattress, imagine not that you are lying on something solid, but that you are being held by something that understands you. The same principle that flows in the distant river, that rises as the morning mist, is there in the quiet rhythm of your breath. The anchor is not below you, it is within you. It is the longing for rest, and it is the rest itself. And in that realization, the need to be so solid, so fixed, so certain, it just washes away. There is a comfort in knowing the ground is fluid, that we are part of a great, flowing return. But what of the man who discovered this? What becomes of the thinker who perceives the unity of all things, when he must still live in a world of separate, stubborn objects? What happens when the mind that measured the heavens meets a puddle in the road? Chapter 11. Can a man who measured the stars die betrayed by a puddle? It is one of the oldest jokes in philosophy, a punchline that is echoed for 2.5 millennia. They say Thales, while walking and gazing at the stars, so absorbed in tracing the patterns of the cosmos, fell into a well, a simple hole in the ground. And a Thracian servant girl, the story goes, laughed at him. She saw the great thinker, the man who claimed to know the nature of everything, humbled by a patch of earth he walked upon every day. We are meant to laugh along, to feel a smug superiority, the ivory tower intellectual, useless in the practical world. But I want you to hear that story again, not as a joke, but as a tragedy. And not a tragedy of failure, but a tragedy of perspective. What if the fall was not a mistake? What if it was the final necessary lesson? Let us picture the scene not from the girl's perspective, but from his. The night is clear over Miletus. The air is cool. The noisy debates of the marketplace have long since faded. For Thales, this is when the world becomes most real. The sun, which blinds us to everything else, is gone. Now the true lights can be seen. He is not just stargazing. He is watching the clockwork of the universe. He is seeing the patterns that govern the seasons, the tides, the rise and fall of civilizations. He is, in his mind, tracing the lines of a cosmic map, a map that reveals the logic behind the apparent chaos of the day. In that moment, he is not a man standing on a narrow street in a small city on the coast of Asia Minor. He is a citizen of the cosmos. His mind is unbound. And then, the well. The ground gives way. There is a shocking, brutal interruption of gravity. The infinite vault of the stars is replaced by the closed, damp darkness of a stone shaft. The music of the spheres is replaced by the sound of his own gasp, the splash of water. It is a violent return to the particular, to the local, to the inconvenient, and the muddy. This is the punchline. But what if the joke is on us? What if the servant girl, for all her practical sense, could only see the well? She saw a man who was clumsy. She did not see a man who was, for one glorious moment before he fell, free. She saw the fall as a failure to pay attention to the earth. But what if his attention was paid to a deeper, more fundamental earth, to the water that waited at the bottom of that well, the very substance he believed held the universe together? The betrayal, you see, is not that the well was there. The betrayal is that the world demands we choose. It forces a cruel dichotomy, the sky or the ground, the abstract or the practical, the vision of the whole or the management of the parts. We are told we cannot have both. We celebrate the practical person who never falls, who never looks up, who spends their life navigating the puddles and wells of the immediate. And we ridicule the dreamer who, in reaching for the stars, stumbles. But what kind of life is it if you never risk the fall? What kind of understanding is it if it never transcends the next step in front of you? Thales' fall is the essential human drama. It is the story of the spirit that yearns for the infinite, trapped in a body that is subject to the laws of the finite. It is the mind that can conceive of the unity of all things, tripped up by the pesky particular thing. And this is not a failure to be avoided. It is a condition to be embraced. It is the very source of our humanity. The fullness of a life is measured not by how successfully you avoid the wells, but by how often you dare to look at the stars, even knowing the wells are there. The pain of the fall is the price of the vision, and perhaps in the cold shock of the water at the bottom, there is a new kind of knowledge. The intellectual understanding that all is water becomes a physical, chilling reality. The philosopher is baptized, unwillingly, into his own philosophy. So when you find yourself stumbling, when you feel the embarrassment of a miscalculation, a misstep, a fall from grace in your own life, remember Thales in the well. Ask yourself, what was I looking at before I fell? Was it a star? Was it a beautiful idea? Was it a hope that lifted my gaze from the mundane path? If so, then the fall is not a mark of shame. It is a scar of honor. It is proof that you dared to look up. The world will always have its servant girls, ready to laugh at the dreamer. But the dreamer has touched the sky. The dreamer has known a perspective that those who never look up can never comprehend. And as you drift towards sleep, you can let go of the day's stumbles, its little wells of embarrassment and hardship. They are not the definition of your day. They are merely the places where your body interrupted your soul's journey. And tomorrow, you can look up again. We've seen the vision of unity and felt the sting of the particular. But what of the end? What becomes of this understanding when the thinker himself must return to the source he described? Is there a final peace to be found in the first philosophy? Chapter 12. Is the final argument for water not logic, but but a memory of sleep. How does a man who believes the fundamental substance of the world is water meet his end? History does not record the precise details of the death of Thales. Perhaps it was a fever. Perhaps it was simply the slow wearing out of the vessel. But I like to imagine him in his final hours, an old man now, his body as dry as parchment, his thoughts having traveled further than any ship from his city's harbor. Did he cling to the solid? To the warmth of a hand? To the familiar texture of a wool blanket? Or did he, in those last moments, feel the truth of his life's work not as an idea, but as a gathering tide? We spend our lives building barriers against the flow. We build identities, careers, reputations, homes, all structures designed to give us a permanent shape in a temporary world. We fight against erosion. We patch the leaks. We fear nothing more than dissolution, the loss of the self we have so carefully constructed. But what if death is not an invasion? What if it is not a foreign army breaking down the gates? What if it is simply the sea, patiently reclaiming a bay? What if it is the ultimate homecoming, the final release of a shape back into the element from which it was borrowed? For Thales, this would not have been a frightening thought. It would have been the completion of a logical and perhaps even a comforting circle. The final argument for water is not found in a treatise or a debate. It is found in the body's deepest knowledge. It is in the memory of sleep. Every night of your life, you have rehearsed for this return. You have practiced letting go. You have experienced a small voluntary death, a trust fall into the arms of the unknown. And what is sleep if not a return to a fluid state? In dreams, the solid laws of the waking world are suspended. Time flows backward and forward. You can be in two places at once. You can speak with the long departed. The ego, the firm I that directs your day, dissolves into a stream of images, emotions, and narratives. You become water. And then, each morning, you are recalled. You condense. You pull yourself together, molecule by molecule, and take a shape once more. You rise from the well of sleep. Thales's philosophy, then, is perhaps the most gentle and prepared for death philosophy ever conceived. It tells us that the substance of our soul is the same as the substance of the great, flowing universe. There is no true annihilation, only a change of state. A river does not die when it meets the ocean. It becomes the ocean. A cloud does not die when it releases its rain. It becomes the life of the earth. The fear of death is the fear of the well, the fear of the splash in the dark. But what if, on the other side of that splash, there is not darkness, but a boundless sea, a return to the source of all life? As you lie here now, yielding to the weight of your eyelids, you are not simply turning off a machine. You are participating in an ancient ritual. You are aligning yourself with the wisdom of the first thinker. You are acknowledging, with your body if not yet with your mind, that you are of the water. The need to hold your shape, to be the solid, responsible person you were today, that need is ending. The contract with the day is fulfilled. Now, you can flow. You can seep into the cracks of consciousness. You can drift on the currents that move beneath thought. This is not a defeat. It is a surrender to a greater truth. Thales's great gift was to suggest that the universe is not a collection of lonely, isolated objects, but a single, interconnected process of flowing and becoming. Your sleep tonight is your personal, experiential proof of his theory. You are not going unconscious. You are becoming cosmic. You are returning to the water. And in that return, there is no need for an argument. There is only a deep, familiar, and endless peace. Let go. The sea is waiting.